Well, for more on poverty proofing and the widening wealth gap, I'm joined by Leila Janah from San Francisco. Leila is the founder and CEO of Samasource and LXMI, the two companies focusing on providing jobs for low-income people around the world. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Rachelle.
Now, we tend to think about poverty as it pertains to underdeveloped countries, but it also persists clearly in large developed economies like the US and the UK. So is there a unified definition of poverty?
Actually, we have a federal poverty line in the United States. Unfortunately, 1 in 6 Americans lives under the federal poverty line of about $23,000 a year for a family of 4. We actually have the highest youth poverty rate in the OECD in this country.
And so in response to that, we've seen this idea of poverty proofing. But how effective do you think that can really be?
I think it's important to attack the symbols of income inequality in schools and symbols that can lead to bullying. But I think the underlying issues are that we're seeing this massive revolution in technology that does not have the gains distributed equally across the population. So I think the most important thing we need to do now is figure out how we're going to reskill workers for the new economy to address that, the underlying root cause of that inequality.
Now, you mentioned the role of technology. Tell us a bit more about how this contributes both to fighting poverty and also helps actually propagate poverty.
Well, we've seen a huge shift in the economy. It used to be that to amass large amounts of wealth, you had to employ lots of people. Now we're seeing that the most valuable companies are employing fewer and fewer people because the algorithms are doing the work. And so there's been a variety of remedies proposed. One of the most interesting ones that we're focused on is reskilling workers for the AI economy. So that means training people in the industries where we're seeing major job growth. For example, freelancing in the US is growing rapidly, and yet very little of our federally funded job training programs are addressing it. A recent report showed that 57 million Americans are now freelancers. That's 1 in 3 workers. And yet, none of the funding that we've seen, none of the of over $2 billion in funding annually allocated to workforce training is focused on that new sector. So there's a massive opportunity, we think, to train people in relevant skills for the future.
So then, do you think there's a danger that when it comes to poverty proofing, that it's essentially a band-aid solution to the reality that wealth inequality does continue to grow?
It's absolutely important that we focus on not only reskilling workers, but ensuring that we're training them for jobs that pay living wages. I think we need a living wage floor across the country, and many of our new congressional representatives are going to work towards that this year. But I think a big part of it is making sure that we're training people for relevant jobs, and that's an easy win. I think that's something that people on both sides of the aisle here can support.
Now, obviously, you have organizations like the United Nations, Oxfam, and individual countries, establishing some of these key initiatives and some of these poverty targets. But how effective have they really been in tackling some of these underlying issues?
I think the challenge is that a lot of the focus on poverty and inequality hasn't really looked at where are the job sectors that are growing and how do we prepare people to meet that growing demand. And freelancing is an interesting example. Here in the United States, we've seen this massive growth in freelancing labor platforms. We barely understand them, let alone how to regulate them. We just, for the first time last year, released a report on freelancing at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's for the first time being seen as real work. So I think there's a lot of potential for solutions in training workers for the jobs that are going to exist in the future.
Now, a lot of times when people think of poverty reduction, they think that it's really a government issue and they're expecting countries to really move in the same direction. But what about the private sector? What can they really do to help tackle poverty?
Well, our solution at Samasource and our sister training program, Sama School, is around giving work. We believe that providing work is a massive social benefit if you're providing living wage work. And the best thing that companies can do is to look at economic diversity as one of the diversity lenses that they use in hiring. There's been a lot of discussion about gender equality and pay equality here in the U.S. About ensuring that we're hiring a diverse workforce, but but too often we are ignoring socioeconomic status when we look at diversity hiring. So it's important that companies look at hiring from lower income populations, and they can provide a huge benefit to those populations when they do that hiring. In fact, I'm a big proponent of giving companies credit for that and creating incentive programs for companies to hire from low income populations when they're paying living wages.
So help us connect the dots. For people who are in low-income families and they're trying to get from where they are now to getting some of these jobs that people are hiring for, getting that training, how do we connect those dots?
I think the biggest first step is ensuring people are skilled in the digital economy. So that's everything from using your existing skills to find work on a freelancing platform, which can often pay substantially above minimum wage and offer much faster on-ramps to higher paid employment. The second step then is to train them in digital skills beyond just using a platform to find work. So this would be things that can be done virtually, remotely from a computer. We're seeing a huge uptick in demand for those types of jobs. There's been a focus on computer coding and a lot of interest in coding academies across the United States, but there are many jobs that are digital in nature that don't require advanced coding skills. We focus at Samasource on producing high-quality training data for the artificial intelligence industry, and that's one of many examples of work that don't require coding skills to provide living wages.
All right, thank you so much. Leila Janah, their founder and CEO of Samasource and LXMI.